Lewis Murden is a psychotherapist and licensed independent social worker clinical practice in Myrtle Beach. He is also an expert on stress reduction. I sat down with Lewis to talk about the stress that teachers and students face and the tools that can be used to manage that stress. Talk to me a little bit about, I know we talked before how you were in education at one point, and obviously you do a lot of work with people, and I'm sure you see students and sometimes teachers that come across your practice. Talk a little bit about the stress that students and teachers are facing in today's world.
Okay, well, let me just say a word about stress in general to start with, just in the modern world that we live in. Dr. Herbert Benson, in a book called Beyond the Relaxation Response, stated that probably 60 to 70% in his research, and he's at Harvard University Medical Center, 60 to 70% of patients who present to a general practitioner, a family doctor, are there for stress-related illness. So it's pervasive in our culture in general. We just have a lot going on. People have a lot of things to keep up with. And we have very old, ancient central nervous systems and brains in a world that is progressing more rapidly than we can mutate to it. So in a sense, we're all playing catch-up. Now, in the schools in particular, I think the demands that are placed on teachers and the demands that are placed on students are also tracking our general culture, in that more and more demands are being made, and we never really have a chance, in a sense, to slow down and catch up a little bit. So we do see quite a few students, and we see a number of teachers as well, and school administrators as well. And the consistent complaint is the ability to just keep up with all the demands, multi-demands, that are being placed all the time. So it is stressful when you have a feeling of time pressure and you have a feeling that you just can't get it all done. And I think that would pretty much be a capsule of what we hear consistently.
Let's talk about students in particular. What are some of the pressures facing students, and what are some of the common problems that they're facing? And what are some ways that we can do something within the school system to address those issues that they're facing?
Well, what the students feel, and in general, I'm capsuling or putting together, not stereotypically, because obviously there's a lot of variability among students, but the common theme is I won't say chaos, but the lack of a consistent structure in which the students feel very secure and safe. There's a lot of change, there are a lot of demands put on them, there are a lot of social pressures, and once again, the students reflect to us that they don't come to a point in school where they consistently feel very comfortable and very safe and very secure. And for any human being in any situation, that creates anxiety, and most of the students that come to us are anxiety patients. And of course we see a considerable number of attention deficit disorder. But they just feel that things never quite settle down, so that every day is predictable and safe and comfortable. And some of that is social. The kids feel a great pressure to be part of the in crowd and to keep up with everybody and to be accepted. And everybody wants that.
What are some things we can do to help students address these pressures that they're feeling?
Well, you and I have talked about the mindfulness approach to this in the pre-interview for this. Mindfulness is a way of self-regulating our internal response to stress. When we feel stressed, when we feel like our surroundings are insecure, that we're not quite sure of what the next moment is going to bring and how we're going to cope with it, we in a sense activate what we would call the flight or fight reaction. The flight or fight reaction involves certain structures of the brain that are primarily dedicated to our survival. So they use a special chemistry of adrenaline and other internal chemistries to, in a sense, ramp ourselves up. They turn on the sympathetic branch of the nervous system to provide us with extra stimulation, extra arousal, so that we can cope with what we're viewing as an abnormal amount of demand, whether it's social demand or whether it's keeping up with schoolwork. It doesn't matter what it is. This is the brain's way of responding to what it perceives as unusual demands on it. Mindfulness is a way to self-regulate that through practices such as breathing, deep muscle relaxation, and in a sense telling myself something more conscious about what's going on. In other words, the way I'm describing what I'm facing to myself also has a factor in producing this flight or fight reaction. By combining several techniques like that together, students and adults are able to self-regulate this reaction, so that even though the external events may be demanding, if my interpretation and my way of dealing with it doesn't evoke this internal response, then we're much more relaxed. Our respiration is slower, our heart rate is slower, we don't feel as much anxiety, we don't feel depression, which is basically feeling hopeless that I can't keep up with everything. All of these things are internal chemistry generated by our own internal perception of what's going on outside of us. Breathing, muscle relaxation, biofeedback is another technique. All of these things enable us to self-regulate that reaction so that it's just not happening, or it's not happening with the intensity and frequency that it would be if we were doing nothing. Great body of research on this, the work of John Kabat-Zinn, for example, Mass General Hospital, Andrew Weil, University of Arizona. The Omega Institute has had some very good training in this area. They have a list of people that are specialized in this area as well. A lot of scientific data to support what I'm describing to you.
How do you integrate mindfulness practice into public schools without drawing criticism from one side that you are pushing some type form of spirituality, and then also from another side you're taking away time from instruction in literacy or numeracy or more of the core subjects?
Okay, well, and the first one is pretty simple. The tools are easy to teach. Breathing and relaxation practices were specifically developed by Dr. Benson at Harvard to remove the spirituality part of it. What he showed there in the laboratory and what the research has shown since then is that what we're talking about is basic human biology. We're not talking about Zen Buddhism or Christianity or Muslim practices. We're talking about human biology. This is about the way the central nervous system and the brain respond to external stress and demands. The second part on how you integrate this and what the payoff is in terms of bottom line test scores, if you wanted to look at it that way, is that picture a student who is more happy, more balanced, less reactive, who is able to control their emotions better because they have a way, if they get too excited, they have a way to calm down. If they get their feelings hurt too badly, they have a way to mediate that. If they have concerns about things that are going on at home, they have ways to self-regulate those feelings. And what you have is a student who is much more capable of learning, just like a student who is well fed with food. This is mental food, if you want to look at it this way. This is a way that you get efficiency in learning. Again, the scientific basis is that if the flight or fight reaction is overactivated, you actually lose cognitive ability. This is why this would be called test performance anxiety. For example, students who are just have a really terrible time performing on tests, one of those reasons is that with the flight or fight reaction, one of the actual physical changes of that is a shift in literally in blood flow to parts of the brain where the senses are predominant over the thinking part of the brain, because that's more necessary to survival when you're under a danger or a threat. So even in test taking, students that can self-regulate, that can calm themselves down, in a sense that can take themselves out of the flight or fight reaction, they'll do better on tests. And again, there's plenty of data to support that, where that's not a theory, that's actually been tested, and the performance is well proven. So you get a better student.
Let's shift gears from student to teacher. Let's say there's probably teachers that will watch this who maybe don't feel stressed out. I think probably most of them deal with stress on and off, depending on the time of year. Some parts of the year are really stressful, some aren't. Why should they consider a mindfulness practice regardless of their stress level? How would it benefit a teacher to engage in mindfulness practice on a regular basis?
Well, once again, the data indicates that a good series of scientific studies. This is a good practice for anyone, whether they have the active perception of being under stress or not. We live in a stressful world. It's loud, it's busy, sleep is compromised for the majority of adults these days because of so many demands. We just live in a stressful environment where even if a person doesn't perceive that they're under stress right then, they probably are. And the major data for that goes back to Dr. Benson's pronouncement of 60 to 70% of patients showing up for primary care are there for stress-related illness. They're not there for trauma, and they're not there for bacterial infection. They're there for headaches, gut aches, body pain that has no real source other than constant muscle tension, because that's one thing we do when we're under stress. So even someone who said, well, I don't feel it at all, then it becomes a great prevention from being one of that 60 or 70%, to be able to stay in the 30%. So it not only has curative effects by settling one down in the moment, but also preventative effects as well.
Talk a little bit about the mindfulness practice itself. So someone's watching this, a student or a teacher is watching this, they want to start in a mindfulness practice. How do they begin specifically? What can they do to get started in this practice?
The most simple techniques are simply breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. And the breath can simply be to learn to do what would be called a calming breath. There's always been an old saying that if you get upset, count to 10 before you do anything. It's the same idea, except in the calming breath we just count backwards. So you start at 10 with a nice gentle exhale and take a breath in, and that would be the count of 10. And then exhale, and then take another nice soft breath in, and that will be 9. And just simply count oneself all the way down to 0. Then after the student is comfortable with that, and we're talking here an exercise of less than a minute for a single calming count. And in terms of incorporating in the classroom, it would be just a few moments for a whole class to get comfortable with learning to do a calming breath quite well. Then once the class has done that, it progresses to a calming count with relaxation. So now I'm not only counting down, but at the same time I'm relaxing my shoulders, relaxing my upper body, my hands, and just being aware of the tension in my body and letting it go with the breath. Those are the two primary trainings, and all it takes is a little practice, and it's amazing how quickly the body adapts this and responds to it by being able to relax more deeply and more quickly. And the breath, as far as breath training, has been around for many, many years. That's how Dr. Benson picked up on it. He was actually looking for a way to treat hypertension, and he found that the breath lowers blood pressure just by simply breathing and telling oneself to relax.
Final question. What are your final thoughts? I mean, what are some other thoughts you might have about mindfulness in schools, about integrating this practice that you've described into schools? How do you answer the skeptics, and how do you go about doing that systematically, getting it into each school, and just your final thoughts on the practice as a whole in schools? Well,
my final thoughts on it are that the world is not going to get any less complex, and it certainly doesn't look like it's going to slow down, so it's become more stressful. And we were teaching students to enter into their world that they're going to come into as adults. And this is one more very powerful tool that we can give to them, along with math and with English and the other subjects. This becomes something that they will be able to use in a very practical sense for the rest of their life. So in my mind, and I think the data supports it, it's invaluable. And again, it's so simple to do. This is really easy to do in the schools and to integrate it.
If people want more information, where would be some books or websites that you might recommend to people who want to learn more about it?
To Google John Kabat-Zinn as a specific researcher, Andrew Weil and his work at the University of Arizona, and just to Google the word mindfulness, and you'll come up with a large number of websites. And they're all going to say pretty much the same thing, but that's good. It's good to have it repeated and see what the core thoughts are. The other thing I would also suggest to the skeptics is support well-developed, well-designed research projects in your school district and see what the results are. Because there's no better way to prove it to yourself than to implement a simple program and then measure the results.
Well, thanks for watching this month's episode of CenterPoint. We'd also like to thank Louis Murden for being on the program. If you would like to learn more about CERRA's programs, head on over to our website at CERRA.org. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at CERRA-SC. That's CERRA-SC. We also have a website dedicated to our nationwide Teacher Cadet program at teachercadets.com, and you can connect to that program through our social media networks at Teacher Cadets. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Just go to the iTunes store and search for CERRA. You can subscribe or download each episode for free. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for the program, feel free to email them to me at todd@CERRA.org. Well, until next time, thanks for watching the September 2012 episode of CenterPoint, the podcast for the Center for Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Advancement. Best wishes on another incredible school year.